Thank you to our amazing panelists who are working around the clock to try to serve different communities deeply impacted by this crisis, and nonetheless have made the time to be with us tonight. It is one of the things I marvel at this community, that as soon as we went remote, one of the questions I started getting was, what can we do? How can we be helpful? What can we do not only to support Heschel, but to help people outside of the immediate Heschel circle? And so it is with that spirit and with just tremendous gratitude that I thank our amazing panelists tonight for joining us. And with that, I will turn it over to Rabbi Ann. As we've done on past calls, we're going to have time for questions after this. And the way to get a question is to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen and to choose me and to chat to me. And I will then assemble your questions faithfully and share them with our panelists. That's in our experience is the best way to manage what our middle school calls the glorious cacophony of Zoom, but which in settings like this, I think is better moderated. With that, I turn it over to Rabbi Ann, and thank you all for joining us.
Hi, everybody. I'm just sort of organizing my screen here so I can see you and see my words at the same time. Okay. I really want most of the time to be by our panelists, but just very briefly, this week's Parsha begins with the word Vayikra, indicating that God called out to Moses, to Moshe. And famously in the Torah scroll, the letter Aleph at the end of the word Vayikra is smaller than the other letters. Much ink has been spilled trying to puzzle through why this is. I feel like the constricted and diminished Aleph is actually a very apt symbol of this particular moment in time, as I spend all day looking at very small pictures of the students of the Heschel School, instead of the big, beautiful living color of the children's smiles, which I'm so used to seeing. But more importantly, and more directly related to this evening, as we all know, the resources that are available to vulnerable New Yorkers have been radically constricted in the past few weeks as a consequence of the pandemic and the transformation it has wrought in our beloved and formerly bustling city. The people who will be speaking to you this evening are all our partners in Hesed throughout the year. They are all, as Ariel already said, doubtless working 16 to 18-hour days right now, doing whatever they can do to find ways of expanding the Aleph for people that are in our city, and in Danielle's case, also people throughout the world. And we are so grateful that they have taken some time out to guide us in how we can support them in this work. So I'm going to introduce all of the speakers in the order they will be speaking. They're each going to talk for a few minutes. As Ariella said, you can send her questions by chat and they will answer questions at the end. Eric Goldstein is the CEO of UJA Federation of New York. It's hard to know what to say about UJA Federation of New York. I think it speaks for itself. He's going to provide us with an overview of what he is seeing in New York City over the past weeks. After that, we'll hear from Greg Silverman, the Executive Director of Westside Campaign Against Hunger, a cooperative supermarket that ensures New Yorkers have access with dignity to a choice of healthy food and supportive services. And he'll speak about how the pandemic is affecting food insecure New Yorkers. Danielle Butin, the Executive Director of AFIA, an organization which she founded dedicated to the support of ongoing health missions and disaster relief worldwide, will speak about what they are doing to try to get desperately needed supplies into the hands of the right people. And Mark Merity, the Executive Director of Dorot, a nonprofit organization whose goal is to alleviate social isolation and provide concrete services to older adults, will talk about how they are supporting a population that is more isolated than ever at this moment in time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to give us an overview.
Thank you, Rabbi Ann. Thank you, Ariella. It's great to be joining all of you today. And just a quick note, Ariella and I have the distinction of starting our not-for-profit jobs on the very same day after long careers in law. And truly, Ariella has been an enormous source of inspiration to me, a role model to many. And it's really my pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. There are many parents on the line. I have 4 kids, and I've been screaming at them for a lot of years to get off their devices, off of their phones, off of their computers. And who would have thought that those devices have become so critical in these times for all of us? But I'm hopeful that once this crisis ebbs, we'll all be, at least for a while, willing to get off our phones and engage with each other, face to face in person. And that's my hope for the not too distant future. So I've been asked, as Rabbi Ann said, to give a quick overview of what we're seeing as the impact of the COVID-19 crisis in New York, recognizing that our work actually extends also globally, but I'm going to focus on New York. And it's hard, frankly, to know where to begin. We've all, in some way or another, been negatively impacted by this crisis, but we also all know that it's our most vulnerable populations: elderly, people with disabilities, people on the verge of poverty who are now or shortly will be jobless as a result of the current situation. That's the community that's going to bear the brunt of this crisis. UJA has long supported a pretty broad network that focused on providing services across a range to the community. So it's the traditional social service agencies that care for the elderly, Holocaust survivors, people with mental health challenges, but we also have supported and continue agencies that make Jewish life flourish: Jewish community centers, camps, Hillels on college campuses, day schools, synagogues. And I'd like to sort of bifurcate the world for a moment and first speak about the social service agencies and their challenges in the moment, and then talk to briefly the Jewish life institutions and the challenges they're facing. And again, this is a moving target. Almost every day, there are new challenges, new unexpected challenges that are resulting in people needing to make the decisions on the fly. So focusing first on the social service world, and you'll hear much more granularly with greater expertise from Danielle, Greg, and Mark, but just to give you the briefest sense, there are agencies in our community that have had to entirely pivot. How do they do business? So take your traditional senior center. JASA Self-Help, two of our network partners, have more senior centers than literally any organization in New York, over 60. They have been told to close their centers. Mark will talk about this from the perspective of Dorot. But obviously, the seniors who went to those centers on a daily basis to get their food and other socialization, they have now had to pivot entirely to grab and go, and then they were told they couldn't do food delivery, and now to focus on remote ways of helping seniors who are particularly isolated deal with this moment. Mark will go more into that, but a dramatic challenge. Then there are agencies who continue to extend to operate as they have before. Food pantries are an example, but with differences. Some of them that were in synagogues have had to close, where there's been exploding demand, and also a significant challenge of how you, in a additional cost of providing for your workers in a safe way, given the current challenges. But the social service agencies in the main have one resource, I guess, that Jewish life organizations do not have, and that's the federal government. So most social service agencies receive a significant amount of their funding from federal government, from city, state, and federal. Government has said to us it's going to take a long time to catch up, to figure out how to redo contracts to allow agencies to do the work they're doing in this moment of crisis. But they've said directionally, we will reimburse agencies. Now, in the best of times, to be clear, government doesn't reimburse even 100% of the direct service. They'll reimburse 80, 85%, and they look to philanthropy to bridge that gap. And that gap is going to grow ever wider. But nonetheless, you have a partner, the government, that ultimately, after significant delay, is going to reimburse to a large extent, which means that what the social service agencies critically need at this moment is cash flow to operate. They need to exist now more than ever to deal with the staggering demands, but they need cash flow to do their work. And so what we and others, we announced last week that we were putting $20 million from our endowment into the Hebrew Free Loan Society to create an interest-free loan fund for all of our social service network partners, allowing them to get critical cash flow until government catches up. We've also provided $1 million loan fund also through Hebrew Free Loan Society for small businesses that we know are going to be significantly affected. And these are all first stage solutions. Then there's a large New York-based fund, not unlike the 9/11 fund. It's called the COVID-19 fund that we've also joined that will provide not loans, but grants to social service agencies and cultural institutions that are, the largest institutions have shut. They also have significant challenges, how they will remain afloat. And finally, we've taken $2 million for food, recognizing there's an urgency around food, particularly as regards upcoming Passover needs to Met Council and other people in the network. But as I've said, that's the social service agency world. You then have Jewish institutions. JCCs are closed. If they're closed, whatever amount of time they're closed, the fee for services that they would typically be deriving that allow them to drive their businesses, the membership fees, are all not coming in. So JCCs are now looking at huge losses of revenue. Camps spend 10 months of the year preparing for 2 months of the year. It's unclear whether the 2 months of that year, summer, will have camp services, and therefore camps are petrified at their ability to continue to provide the services and stay afloat. Ariella, Rabbi Ann, many others can talk about day school challenges, and there are many looming. At the very most bare, we know that there are parents who haven't needed scholarship, who are for the next year going to need scholarship. So the demands on the school to not turn students away, to make sure that anyone who wants a day school education can get one, the needs of the schools around scholarship demands are going to grow exponentially. Synagogues also, there are a lot of new challenges for them. Their fiscal plans are closed. How do they continue to tend to their communities? So we hope in the short term at UJA to come up with a first stage plan for the Jewish institutions, but the challenges there, frankly, are even greater than for the social service institutions, given the funding model that's existed all these years in the community. How can we help? Obviously, we should stay home. We should do all we can to flatten the curve so we get through this as quickly as we can. We obviously should be checking in with our neighbors, with isolated elderly. This is an isolating experience for all of us. Many are there with our children, with our spouses. There are many who are there by themselves, many of them who are technologically challenged, for whom technology is now ever more critical. We need to be reaching out to them the old-fashioned way by phone and doing it as often as we can. We've also posted on our website a series of remote volunteerism opportunities. I urge you, one just example. A lot of college kids are at home. We're looking to have virtual homework helpers that could go online and help students with homework and other educational challenges. But there are many, many opportunities, and we're hopeful, and Greg will talk to this more, that there will be opportunities to do in-person delivery once requirements are set about how you can volunteer in a safe way with all that's going on today. Bottom line, the challenges have never been so great. We can talk about prior crises, but I expect that what we're going to be living with will be with our community for years to come. It's not clear that the philanthropic base will continue as we've come to expect it in years past. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation and look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. Okay, so as you mentioned, Greg is going to tell us a little bit more in more detail about where things stand in terms of food and food insecurity. Greg Silverman.
the West Side Campaign Against Hunger. Many of you know us. We're 40-year institution on the Upper West Side, feeding about 22,000 New Yorkers. And I'm going to speak tonight about sort of day in the life, what's happening today, and also from WISCA's perspective, but also I lead a collective purchase model that has allowed us to be in touch on a daily basis with 4 of the other largest pantries and soup kitchens in the city. So we're hearing what's happening in Staten Island, in Brooklyn, and East Manhattan, in the Bronx. So, on a normal day at WISCA, we're serving 8,000 families throughout the month. They're coming through to shop in our pantry. On a normal day at WISCA, our mobile trucks are giving out food in the community. On a normal day, our social service teams are meeting with hundreds of people, helping them with their food stamps, health insurance, all their different issues in their lives to help support them well beyond food, because food is sort of the tip of the spear, right? People come to us for food, but the truth of the matter is soup kitchens and food pantries do not end hunger by any means. They never have and they never will. Social services can help do that, can make people food secure. In the last week, we've closed up our entire in-person social service offices. So all of our social service staff are working remotely. They're taking calls from customers, many of them elderly, who often don't have the technology to navigate these things anyways. But so we're walking a lot of people through how to fill out their SNAP applications, recertifications, Medicaid, Medicare. Unemployment is going to be a big one coming through that we're going to be helping people with. Last week, we got rid of our entire volunteer program for safety reasons. 1,700 people a year volunteer with us. And we cut that off at, as quick as possible. And what we found, right, is it's really tough to serve hundreds of people in a day, tens of thousands of pounds of food with only a skeleton crew and no volunteers. At the same time, a member of the church, St. Paul, St. Andrews, where we're based, came in contact with someone last week who had the virus. Immediately, we closed down the entire building. Within 3 hours, we moved 25,000 pounds of food up onto the street, rented a truck so we could save the food. The next day, we were serving food once again, but only on the street. So we completely flipped our model from having a walk-in grocery store to having a street side market, from having in-person interaction with customers to handing out bags, from having 1,700 volunteers to having 0 volunteers. So it's been obviously very difficult for our team. But at the same time, it's quite incredible, right? Like, the team is, sad to say, innovating like never before. Like, our job is to be the model of how you make change in this city. We give out almost 50% fresh produce. We give out fresh meats. We give out fresh milk. We've had to scale that back a bit, but we're still making sure we're giving out the best food in this city, making sure we give the best service to our customers. But it's now being online. It's now being done in different ways. We hope in the coming week to bring back volunteers, because we need volunteers, but we're not going to be able to bring, the majority of our volunteers have been immigrants who are seniors. We're not going to have any seniors volunteering with us. Anyone who has any chronic issues, anyone who's had contact with someone who has the virus, we're going to go through a rigid screening process of every person. And this is the new normal, right? This is going to go on for months, not weeks. We 100% already know that we're spending an average of, in the last 2 weeks, $15,000 extra dollars each week. And that's just on top of our normal expenses. We had to cancel our spring fundraiser. So we're in a bit of a hole fundraising and sort of trying to push really hard to get funds so that we can give out more food to more people and also support our staff, from safety gear to extra pay to making sure everyone is taken care of so that they can come to work and do a great job. So truly a struggle, but as you all know, right, everyone is struggling in their own families, and it's the same thing in the workplace, especially people who are frontline service workers. So I would say the 3 things I think Eric already said: stay home if you don't need to be out. If you are in a category of someone who has little risk of getting COVID, we are going to need volunteers, 100%. It's not going to be a lot of volunteers. We're going to have people spread out beyond social distancing. We want to make sure everyone's safe. But folks who are able, we're going to need people to pack boxes and to take in deliveries. But truth be told, this is a situation where cash is king. We need cash flow to be able to buy food. We do not want to buy food retail. Getting canned goods from donations from individuals is truly not helpful. We have to sort through them. We have to go through them, find the right, for every can that someone brings and goes on the street to bring to us, that's exposing them potentially to getting the virus. And we can buy 3 to 4 cans for the price of the can bought retail. So the cash that we receive and other pantries and soup kitchens that you want to give to could receive will go a long way for food and also covering operational challenges. So I'll pause there. I hope that's helpful, just sort of what we're seeing on the street. And it's the same in all of our partner agencies. We've all cut volunteer programs. We've all gone virtual with social services. We're all seeing more new customers. And at the same time, our elderly customers are not showing up. So we actually haven't seen an explosion of customers. We've seen a shifting base of customers. And right, each day is different. So we'll see what happens in the week ahead.
Thank you so much, Greg. Okay, now, so we're gonna hear from Danielle now to talk a little bit about, I know we're all hearing about masks and respirators, and I'm sure she's gonna broaden that picture for us. So Danielle, please.
So it is such a pleasure to be here tonight. And this school has been so involved and so supportive, and the volunteers from multiple grades have made a huge difference when our warehouse was fully operational. So let me talk a little bit about what AFIA is doing. And for those of you who are not familiar with AFIA, we are the resource for the greater New York hospitals to donate medical supplies, equipment, any durable medical supplies when they are flipping over inventory, or because of regulation, these supplies can't be reintroduced. So AFIA has about 40,000 square feet of warehouse space. And when this disaster began, we took our donors very, very seriously. We were getting maydays starting weeks ago from nurses, doctors who we've worked intimately with for years. It has been harrowing, the kinds of emails. Every day, I would say, we get 50 to 100 emails from children of physicians and nurses, from people in our network who have been donating to us, to people we packed for Haiti when the Haiti earthquake hit. And we are in the harrowing position of having to decide where we send supplies and how we can make an impact. And so we have gone from an organization and that simply packs supplies and delivers and does the abundance of good work that we can, to now trying to figure out where can we move what inventory to protect as many staff as we possibly can. And that is a seat that I can't believe our organization is now sitting in. So what have we done? We've done as much as we possibly can because it is unbearable. Our healthcare workers of New York need each of us to step up and to save them, as they are saving thousands every single day. They are working 12 to 14-hour shifts. They are bleaching masks. They are under-resourced in every single institution. We are sending thousands of N95 masks to hospitals. We have donations coming in from across the country now, and we are diverting them to our biggest partners. We're working with Monty, we're working with NYP, we're working with NYU. We are in it with the biggest hospitals. So anything that we get that is technically minded, that would belong in an ICU or a CCU, we are immediately packing up and sending in. There are more than can be counted community clinics, federally qualified health programs in New York and the boroughs and Westchester that were terribly defunded years ago. So we decided that we were going to start to stock them with supplies, and not just the PPE, but in addition to the PPE, we're going to help them with the primary care supplies they're going to need. And one of my favorite examples of this came from Harlem United, a big federally qualified health center on the Upper West Side. And when I said to them, what can you ask us for that's going to reduce the influx of care? They said, we need as many walkers, crutches, and canes as you can give us so we can reduce the risk of falling so people won't come to our ER because they have fallen, which was brilliant thinking on their part. So now what we are doing is we are sending as many items of PPE light, as we refer to it. This is where homemade masks are going to the federally qualified health centers. Somebody in medical manufacturing literally said to me, we have 4 pallets of expired masks from 2 years ago. We can throw them out or we can get them to you. And the federally qualified health centers have said, we'd rather have something that is expired than have nothing. So send them to us. So we are doing everything in our power to try to grant wishes for protection of the healthcare staff that have to be able to get through this crisis. We are literally emptying our warehouse of the supplies that have been donated by those we are turning it around now to help. And we've done some beautiful partner work with UJA supported agencies in Westchester and the Bronx. We've worked with JASA, with JCCA and the Cottage School, WJCS, the Jewish Board of Family Services. Their frontline workers need supplies. They need, for the first time ever, they need protective clothing, they need masks, they need gloves, and the volume is not one that any of these agencies is familiar with because they're not medical practitioners. So we are trying to figure out how to help as many as possible. And I'll give you the most recent example of this is a donor from Rockland County. This wonderful man, Mendel, gave us 695 masks that he trucked over. 150 are going immediately to the Orthodox Jewish nurses who are working in Brooklyn with the Hasidic community and trying their best to protect themselves as they are delivering home care and treating people at home. And the rest are going to go to NYU Langone in Brooklyn. And what AFIA is doing at this point is the best it possibly can to take the supplies and get them out on a daily basis. We have multiple shipments that we're making. So how can people get involved in this work? We have gone to the New York State Nursing Association, and anything that you hear, and I have to say this, the biggest challenge right now is the price gouging. There are people who are soulless, who have inventory in the Northeast of the United States, and instead of charging $2, $3, $4 for an N95 mask, they are charging anywhere between $6 and $22 a mask. And I hope the Attorney General goes after them. And so what we are trying to do is the following. One is we are looking to source supplies from Mexico City and China immediately. I don't have faith that our government is going to show up with the supplies that New York healthcare needs. So we are trying to source as much as we possibly can and quickly. So that's one. Two, we've gone to the New York Nursing Association and we've asked them to bring in retired nurses to help us pack so that when we are getting requests from some of these sites, ERs, ICUs, nursing homes, they can take what we have. A good example is we could have a non-sterile surgical gown that had been recovered out of operating rooms a year ago, and they can turn them into PPE packs for us. So we are going to carefully space these nurses in our warehouse, and they're going to start to pack for us so that we can respond. We have an Excel spreadsheet that is a mile long of requests at this point. 2, 3, we need all of you. We need Heschel to activate for us. Your families and your children have been extraordinary volunteers. We need everyone on the phone asking every beauty parlor for their gloves, every construction person for all of their masks and gear. We need art students and art programs and schools to give. Hastings High School just donated 2 pallets of gloves that they scourged through everything that they had. There is inventory out there that we need all of you to activate and ask for these supplies to be delivered to AFIA so we can make a difference in the healthcare of New York. And that's what we are committed to. As an organization, we have completely pivoted to being able to save those who save us. And UJA is making an enormous difference in our ability to do this work. Okay.
Wow. Okay. This is a lot to take in here. Okay, I know that all of us, I'm sure all of us have older adults in our lives that we're concerned about, that are isolated. I don't know if my mom is on this call, but I haven't seen her in person in a number of weeks. And Mark is going to talk about that population in particular.
Well, thank you very much, and
Remember
good
to
evening,
chat
everybody.
your questions to me if you have them. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah,
Just
no problem.
if you have questions, choose the chat function at the bottom, choose me, send me your questions. Sorry. Thank you, Mark.
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. As a proud Heschel alumni parent, and as the executive director of DeRote, it's very nice to be speaking with you this evening. Unfortunately, it would be under different circumstances, but I think that there's a really important message, a couple of important messages that I'd like to convey. But first, for those of you who may not know about DeRote, we are a nonprofit organization providing services to older adults. DeRote is a Hebrew word meaning generations. We have been providing services to seniors through an intergenerational model for over 40 years. On an annualized basis, we provide services to over 3,500 older adults who participate in over 42,000 programs with us. And we engage 6,000 volunteers a year. And we are a proud affiliated agency, core agency of UJA Federation, and enjoy and appreciate that partnership. So 10 days ago, feels like 10 years ago, 10 days ago, DeRote had to pivot, as all of us have, and completely change our program model, which focused on face-to-face social connectedness and social engagement, to one that was looking at how we can engage with older adults from afar. We know already that social isolation and loneliness has devastating healthcare consequences. Before the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic, we knew that social isolation and loneliness leads to increased levels of depression, early onset of dementia, increased levels of depression, early onset of Alzheimer's, and it just has it really negatively impacts one's quality of life. You add on top of that this pandemic, and it really exacerbates the problem greatly. So there are a number of things that you can do in collaboration and cooperation with DeRote, and we would welcome your participation. So first, one of the important things that you could do is you could check in on your older neighbor, but you have to do it from a distance. If you know their phone number, the best way to connect with friends and relatives who are older is through the telephone, and to minimize that contact. If you have older friends or older neighbors who live in your apartment building, it would be okay for you to knock on the door, introduce yourself, but step back from the door and don't get too close to them, because that social distancing is absolutely essential. If you go to the store for them, that's a lovely thing for you to do, but you need to make sure that you're taking the necessary precautions of wearing gloves, of being able to just leave the package at the door, again, so that you're minimizing your direct contact with older adults. I'll explain why in just a minute. If you're looking for activities for your family, DeRote has an extensive card making program, and we'd love for you to make birthday cards for older adults and get well cards. We send out literally thousands of cards a year to seniors in the community. And our friendly visitors who went into the homes of seniors would frequently find the DeRote birthday card made by a DeRote volunteer sitting on the refrigerator. Just like you have your kids' birthday cards and pictures on your refrigerator, for many of DeRote's older adults, it's the DeRote volunteer and the DeRote community that is their family. So we would welcome if you made cards with your family, sent them to DeRote. We will be sure to send them out to older adults to the community in the coming months and over the course of the year. Another thing that you can do, and one of the things that we have really looked to grow our capacity, is in our University Without Walls program. This is an amazing program that was started well over almost 25 years ago, where we have small classes for older adults to participate over the telephone. The groups are anywhere between 12 and 15 older adults. And it's all about social engagement over the telephone. Historically, the participants for this program were older adults who were largely homebound or had other serious issues that made it difficult for them to get out and participate in other community programs. But we have seen a tremendous interest now on being able to have other older adults participate in this program. We've had agencies within the UJA Federation system reach out to us, and other agencies within the senior center world of Live On New York, who said that they really want to move and steer their senior population to Dorot. So if you have an interest in facilitating a University Without Walls class, it can be anything from a discussion about current events. It can be using your whatever professional skills you have. If you're interested in volunteering your time and facilitating a University Without Walls class, please reach out to Dorot, and we'd be happy to enlist your services. We've already added 45 new classes to our course catalog that we're going to be able to serve anywhere between 12 and 15 seniors, and we're looking to really grow this program exponentially over the next coming weeks. What you can also do is that there may be older adults that you know, friends, relatives, or neighbors, who may not necessarily have been interested in this program historically, but now that they're at home, University Without Walls might be a really interesting program and way for them to stay connected. Another new program that we are creating, and I have to just give a huge shout out to the Dorot staff. I have never worked with a group of social workers, leaders who have dedicated, they worked all weekend, late at night I was getting emails from them, and I just have to say that they have really worked incredibly hard to both modify our existing programs and to be able to modify and move forward with new programs. One of the new programs that we're creating is what we're calling Caring Calls, where we are going to be looking for volunteers to be making phone calls to older adults in the community. We have been absolutely flooded by our 6,000 volunteers who have said, okay, what can we do to help? So at the moment, we are looking to really build that program and build some capacity so that we are able to both not only reach out to Dorot older adults, but also partner with other organizations who normally serve seniors in their community to also get them on a list as well. So you can express your interest by contacting us. Give us a little bit of time as we are still really creating this program, and we see this as a program for the future going forward, but we are actively working on that. I want to conclude with a serious word of caution. So, it's a really hard one. It's hard to listen to and it's hard to hear. As an organization, Dorot staff and leadership have been working tirelessly for over 40 years to bring the generations together. That is really what we are all about. That's the beauty, that's the secret sauce, to get a young person and an older adult together to be able to share experiences. There's nothing more beautiful. Unfortunately, at this time, however, it's imperative that we keep the generations separate. It's very hard for me to say that, but here are the statistics. We know that people who are over the age of 70 with underlying medical conditions have a much higher risk of getting seriously ill from COVID-19, and particularly those if you have heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, or lung disease. There's a serious risk that older adults will die, which means that what happens is that younger people may be asymptomatic. That is, that they may not be showing any signs of the virus, but in fact may be able to transmit that to older adults. In Spain, there is an 11% fatality rate for older adults. In Italy, China, and South Korea, the fatality rate for people over the age of 70 who get COVID-19 is 20%. That is huge. So it's really critical that we are able to keep the generations separate and to protect the older adults in our community. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you all. Thank you, Eric and Greg and Danielle and Mark. for really an inspiring and provocative and profound set of reflections. I should say up front that Rabbi Ann and I will be working hard to get some of these suggestions and possibilities for service up on our remote hub, so that to the extent that there are concrete things that have come up over the last 45 minutes or so where our community can actively engage and help, we're going to try to be a source of information there. UJ is already helping us with that, and we're very grateful for that. And so hopefully we will be able to be helpful on that front also. If people have questions, please send them to me using the chat function. I will start out with one, and then if we have more, we can take them. And it might be a question beyond what you're thinking about right now. I know it's something that that educators are thinking about right now. So we all spend a lot of time now looking at graphs regularly about possible projected paths that this epidemic will take. And I wonder if you could just reflect a little on how you're thinking about the pacing of your organizations and the pacing of your services, and how we should be thinking about that from your perspective as we sit at what could be the very beginning of something much longer, and where we're certainly unsure of what the trajectory will look like. I think Greg had to go. So if you have questions for Greg, please send them to me and I will pass them along.
So this is Eric. Again, thank you for this opportunity. There are probably 3 discrete stages here. The first is the first round of emergency relief, much of it cash flow related, so that in the crush of this enormous burden and disrupted service models, that there's the ability to sustain critical social service agencies right now until we can figure out what happens next. So you need to have immediate cash flow. We don't know how long this crisis is going to last, and therefore we don't know its severity. There's an enormous unpredictability here. And when it comes, therefore, to the Jewish life institutions, we think there are also like 2 stages. There's the first one, you need to sustain the core agencies. And by the way, not only the core agencies, there are a lot of smaller startups that have created, that work in the gaps that aren't otherwise being delivered. And we need to sustain those organizations too. But there's going to be a first stage. And then there's, I think, going to be a next stage of visioning. What is the Jewish community, what is the social service community going to look like 2 or 3 years from now in the face of what's happened now? So we need to be focused on the immediate near term to sustain core organizations, but at the same time, we need to be visioning what do we think the community needs are and what is the most efficient way to address them. We're not going to have those conversations immediately. I think we need to start them immediately. We're not going to have answers immediately, but we need to have the immediate needs, get organizations sustained, but then start to the visioning about what the after might look like, recognizing there's a lot of unpredictability given how long this might or might not last.
Danielle, Mark, maybe I'll throw one more question out and then you can all reflect on either this or the last question. For people in our community who have skills of different kinds, tech skills, legal skills, social service skills, I think we hear you loud and clear about and totally understand the most immediate need for funding. Are there skill sets that your organizations or that you're aware that other organizations would need as contributions in kind, or is that harder to manage than valuable?
I think it's a combination. I think that there's certainly ample opportunity there, but to be perfectly candid, this is so fresh for us. and that we are, things are moving so quickly that we have not had a chance to even catch our breath to figure out what our long-term needs are. Unfortunately, I think that this is probably going to be a pretty long duration in terms of what, if we look to see what's been happening in Europe and in Asia before the United States. And so I think that there's certainly going to be an opportunity for individuals with the skill set to be able to lend that expertise to organizations. I think at this juncture, just being so early into this crisis, we are looking at just what do we need to do for tomorrow, and what do we need to do for the beginning of next week, and thinking beyond that. It's been hard for us, at least for us at DeRote. It's been more immediate in terms of what's the immediate crisis, and how can we adjust. So I think that an important perspective, but I think that the skill sets, particularly from the Heschel School parent body, is a huge asset for the community.
I would love help from anyone who has connections to massive international supply chains. So if there's an area of expertise that we need right now, I think it is really that, number one. I'm used to receiving donations. I'm not used to being in a position where I need to locate and purchase supplies to sustain the well-being of our healthcare domestically. So that is an area that we could use. And I love the question in terms of the pacing. I think for those of us who are on the front line of saving and helping those who are on the front line and affected by this pandemic, I'm not pacing well at all, and neither is my staff. Our self-care is atrocious. And it's, I think Mark can speak to this. I think Eric can speak to this. For people who are in a position to help, it's you show up and you give what you can do and do it well. And the next phases will come. But while we have a chance to make a difference, you have to make a difference.
Let me add one real need that we're hearing across our agencies, which is legal services. There are incredibly complicated but incredibly consequential legislation, the federal legislation, the city and state regulations around HR issues, but well beyond HR issues, just navigating the current reality and how you deal with employees appropriately. There may be need for restructuring, but I think legal services, people who understand government contracts, there are a lot of skills, and there are organizations that are aggregating volunteers in those areas. And so for those of you who are inclined, please let me know, and I'm happy to connect you appropriately. But legal services, government relations are critical needs as well for our organizations.
Fantastic.
Let me
Thank
say
you.
one more piece. Can I
Please.
just add one more piece to that? So if there are any
Feel
parents who are psychotherapists, there is a big call for therapists right now to provide backup debriefing and crisis work for the healthcare workers. And I can send you that link as well.
Fantastic. We have many more questions that are about how we can stay connected to you, and mindful of your time and exhaustion levels. I'm going to keep those questions for Rabbi Ann and myself. We are very eager to help channel this community's enormous resources and goodwill into your organizations and into other organizations you can direct us to. We are eager to get our students involved. We heard from a wonderful psychologist last week, Lisa Damore, who really stressed that one of the ways that kids can manage both anxiety and anger and helplessness through this is through being more involved and helpful. So suggestions that you all gave us tonight, from making cards to legal services, Rabbi Ann and I are taking copious notes. Mindful of your time, I'm going to thank you and assure everybody here that we have all of the contact information of these amazing, amazing community professionals, that we will be working with their organizations to figure out how to be most efficient in our provision of what we can do to help. And really, I know that Mark, Danielle, Eric, Greg, and absentia, we're just enormously grateful that amidst the incredible work you're doing, you made time to talk to us tonight. I think it was sobering and inspiring, and just important for us to hear from you directly. Thank you for leaving us with so many suggestions, and we will, I promise, do our part to try to follow up on the incredible calls for service that you just left us with. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this program, and especially Eric, Danielle, Mark, Greg. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all the ways that you are supporting our community, for all the ways that you're going to inspire us to better support our community, and for giving us your time tonight. Stay healthy and safe, and you just have our blessings. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.